Okay, so I put together this video to demonstrate how to easily identify linkages that might exist from one night of observations to a subsequent night of observations. So what I've done here in this example is I have created a first night of observations. So this populates the observation window. So this should look familiar to you if you've gone through this process before. And you'll notice that most of these observations are already associated with known objects. So they have either a provisional identifier or a permanent identifier. But there are several that are not yet matched with a known object, so they just have a track identifier. So anyway, what you want to do is export these observations to a repository. So I'm going to create a new repository and give it a label. This is night number 1. And then I click OK, and that creates the repository for the first night. And then you can either double click it or click the select button, and either way that's going to export these observations to that repository. And then you do the same thing for the second night of observations. So I navigate over to night 2, and I do want to go ahead and reset the list because I'm working with a different set of observations. So I click yes, and then I do the same thing. I export to repository, and I create another repository for night number 2. Click OK, and then select it. So at this point you have created 2 repositories for the 2 nights of observations, and when you have done that, then you can use the tool over here. This is Tools, Identify Linkages, and so what it wants here is then 2 different sets of directories to search. So set A and set B. So this is fairly straightforward. Set A would be, for example, night number 1, and set B would be night number 2. You could have more than one directory in each set, but for our example here, we're just saying that we have 2 different nights that we're comparing against each other. So when you click the Start button, that's going to invoke the Find Orb software on each of these possible linkages. So it's basically 38 times 44 different possible linkages to examine. So it'll take a little while, and we'll go ahead and let it finish that and then come back with the results. Okay, so it has now completed the link process, and these are the results that have returned. So you have object A, object B, median residual, max residual, and what you really care about is the median residual. This tells you what the median residuals are of the combined observations. So if this is under 1 arcsecond, then there is a fairly good likelihood that they are observations of the same object. So as an example, here we have a set of observations that were given track identifier ABC0251 in the first night, and in the second night we had another set of observations with a different track identifier ABC0295. So after having run the link process, it came back and said that these were observations of the same object. So what you can do is you can right click, view combined observations, and that's going to populate this form here. So you have the first night with 3 observations, the second night with its 3 observations, and then you can click View and Find Orb. And so this tells you the residuals of those 6 observations, and they're all under 1 arcsecond. So again, that's a very good chance that these are in fact observations of the same object. So that's how you can identify linkages from one night to the next. And you could take this a step further. If you wanted to, for example, generate a report that is comprised of only 2 night linkages, then here's how you would do that. So you go back to your observation window, and I'm just going to start from scratch. So I'm going to reset all, and I'm going to load up one of the 2 nights. So this is night number 2, and I'm going to go ahead and load up night number 1, and this time I'm going to append to the list. So when it asks if I want to reset the list, I'm going to say no, because I want to have combined observations. So as you can see, we have 246 observations from both nights of data, and then what I can do here is I can say, okay, I'm going to delete any link where the median residual is greater than 1. So just click on delete from the pop-up menu, and then over here we can say apply confirmed links. So when you do that, it's going to modify the observations, and you'll notice that track identifier 295 is no longer in the list. You have 294, you have 296, there's no more 295. What it did was it linked up 251 with 295, and so as you can see here, 251 now has 6 observations associated with it as opposed to just 3. So when I view those observations, you basically have what you saw earlier, except they're all under the same track identifier. And then you can take it another step further and say, okay, I want to now delete, or I want to remove those observations that did not match up from both nights. So if you do that, then you wind up with only a set of observations that spanned both nights. So these were observations of the same object from night 1 and night 2. So anyway, that's how you can identify linkages from 2 different nights of observations. So anyway, thank you for watching, and see you next time.